Welcome back to another episode of the Well Done podcast. Today's guest is someone who truly embodies resilience, reinvention, and wellness. I'm so excited to introduce Lynn Power, who is the founder of the clean hair care brand MASAMI and the founder of the Conscious Beauty Collective, which is a platform that supports indie brands in the clean beauty space. Lynn has a truly powerful story. Not only has she faced extreme challenges in business, she launched MASAMI literally weeks before the COVID lockdown in 2020, but she was also diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer not too long after. And so while this conversation is about beauty and about business, it is also about wellness and resilience and living a life of purpose and intention. That's enough for me. I want to welcome Lynn to the show.
Hi, thank you. That was such a good intro.
Well, I know that there's so many angles to your story. I think for their listener, what would be useful is just to start with your entrepreneurial one, how you spent almost 30 years in advertising, working with some of the biggest beauty brands in the space. You worked with Clinique, L'Oreal, Nexus, the list goes on. But then you left and you launched your own beauty brand, Masami. Would love to hear what inspired that move. What made you decide to leave this executive career?
Well, first of all, being a CEO is not all what it's cut out to be. I think sometimes people have this image that the CEO job is, I don't know, kind of a posh job. You're above the fray, but it's absolutely the opposite. You deal with all the crap. So I found that, I was dealing with lots of finance issues, HR issues, lawsuits. You're the person that has to put out all the fires. So it was very rare that you'd have a day where somebody'd be like, "Hey, I just want to say something nice or good job," or, like, "Hey, we had this really good thing happen." It was usually like, "No, we need you to deal with this fire that's happening over here." So that got old because what I really love about the business and kind of why I started my own business is I love the creation and the creativity of building a brand. And that I was so far removed from that in my executive role for several years that I just wasn't enjoying it. And I wanted to get back to really why I got in the business in the first place, which is to build brands that hopefully matter.
And then what inspired Masami and why did you go into hair?
I worked on tons of hair care brands throughout my career. I had done L'Oreal's hair care and hair color lines and launched actually their natural match line and then relaunched their Vive line for about the fifth time. And then I worked on Nexus. I've just worked on a lot of hair care. So I had left and I was doing some consulting with startups because I really like the idea of impacting the business almost immediately. I mean, you'd have a conversation with a startup founder and you'd talk about positioning or copy or imagery or content or marketing. And then literally next day you'd look at their website and they'd already changed it. It doesn't happen in the corporate world. It's like weeks and months and lawyers and all that stuff. So I loved that immediacy of what I was doing. But I then met my co-founder, James, who'd been working on formulas for about 10 years. He's not a chemist, he's not a hairstylist, but people think he is because he's knowledgeable probably enough about both of those things. He worked at Clairol for 20 years. And so he'd been working on these formulas and had no idea, I would say negative ideas, because it was almost like the wrong ideas of how to actually like commercialize a business. And I think actually that's a good partnership. And sometimes people ask me about, finding a co-founder and that kind of thing. I think if you can find somebody who's complementary, where your skill sets don't overlap, too many people gravitate to somebody just like them, who thinks like them, who has a similar background. But the problem with that is inevitably you're going to clash on something and you're both going to think you're experts. When you have somebody where your skill sets are totally different, we don't have that issue at all. So it works really well. So we decided to launch Masami together. He actually had a different brand name when we first met that he'd been toying with, and it was terrible. So I said to him, look, if we're going to do this, I have to actually change the brand name. I have to change the formulas a little bit to make them cleaner. We have to test it on every hair type and texture. We have to do the proper diligence. And, then we have to do packaging, get our e-commerce site set up, or go to market strategy and all that good stuff. And he was like, okay. So it worked.
So was clean always important to you from the get-go? Because a lot of brands that you were working with at L'Oreal were not necessarily clean brands. So what inspired that?
Oh, I would say not only are they not clean, they're very dirty. In fact, I've worked on some of the probably worst toxic brands you can think of, which I won't name, but I didn't know it at the time. And that's sort of my defense now. But partly one of the reasons why I'm so committed to building a brand that's based in values and has really good ingredients and doesn't have any of those toxins in it, because I feel like, I was partly responsible for pushing those on people back in the day, myself included, because I used all that stuff. And who knows what actually contributed to my cancer? We don't know because it was environmental. I don't have any genetic markers or anything like that. I just think also these days, you can't really launch a beauty business and not be clean. It's like,
Yeah.
why? There's so many alternative ingredients out there that are perfectly good. I think consumers are demanding more of it, and you just don't need to fall back on the old toxins. Now, I think they're one of the reasons why so much of our industry is still what I would say dirty, toxic, is because it's a lot cheaper to fill your shampoo with sulfates than Mekabu powder. And so you can make your shampoo for, $3 for a huge bottle, but it's literally just detergent. And it's very hard for those brands, those legacy brands, to think about switching over to different ingredients, which are way more expensive. So that's going to disrupt potentially their loyal consumer or their supply chain. They've already got these locked in supply chains where they're buying tonnage of these ingredients, and it's not such an easy thing to change that. But when you're small, you can do it right from the beginning. You can set everything up, you can have the right ingredients, you can do those things that are the right way to do them in terms of vetting the type of ingredients you want, the active ingredients you want, and making sure that they're the highest quality. And then also baking in commitment to sustainability, the environment, community. We give back to the community, all those things that it's much harder for a big business to do that.
It's almost table stakes now, right, for new beauty brands to be clean,
Yeah.
and the consumer expects it. I want to go back a bit because you mentioned an ingredient, Mekabu, which is the star ingredient of your hair care line. I'm just curious where that came from and how did you know this was going to be, or like where did this botanical come from? What does it do? What are its
Yeah.
benefits?
Yeah. So my co-founder, James, he's married to a Japanese man named Masa. And Masahiro grew up in a little town in northeast Japan called Atsuchi, and his mother was a hairdresser. So he grew up around this ingredient, which grows right there in the Bay. And I was fortunate enough to go up and visit him and his family. And he lives in New York now, but his family's still there. What they used to do for years is kind of DIY. They used to take the ingredient, dry it, powder it down, and put it in their skincare and hair care because it really acts like a sponge to bring natural hydration and nutrients to your hair. Um, Also in Japan, they take it as a supplement. It's actually known, it has an ingredient in it called fucodoin that is a cancer fighting ingredient that there are lots of studies in Asia about its ability to help cancer atrophy, kill itself, which I take now as a supplement, which I would not have known about had it not been in my shampoo. So it's like kind of comes full circle.
Wow, that's so interesting. In terms of the sustainability aspect for
Yeah.
Masami, can you expand on, what is the brand doing to incorporate sustainability into its business model in addition to the clean beauty aspect?
So that's a great question because a lot of times people don't think beyond the formula, but there's so much more to sustainability. And it really is an entire business, holistic business model. So the first thing we did is we set up the MASAMI Institute when we launched because we wanted to make it a core part of the business, not an afterthought. And what the MASAMI Institute does is it takes a portion of our proceeds, and we're still very small. So one of the things that gets me excited is being able to put more money in there as we grow. But we donate money to ocean research in Northeast Japan, where we get our hair ingredient, because our philosophy is if you take from the earth, you have to replenish. And that bay was really completely almost, it wasn't destroyed, but it was transformed in a negative way by the tsunami in 2011. The tsunami came in and ripped out a lot of the seaweeds and natural botanicals that were growing in the bay that the people rely on for their diet and for the ecosystem. And it swept in all sorts of sea urchins who were eating up whatever was left. So we actually work with a guy named Kazuya who was inspired to move up there from Tokyo. He was an IT guy, and now he dives in the bay to monitor what's happening in the ecosystem. The interesting thing about that is he not only monitors it, but when he realized that the sea urchins were like parasites, there was like an infestation. What he did is, we eat those. They're actually delicacies in Japan. And so he did a recipe book to inspire the local people to go down and pull all those out of the ocean and eat them. And it worked. They literally went down there, scooped out all these sea urchins that were destroying the ecosystem, and they had a lovely snack.
Wow.
So, but if he hadn't done that, we don't know. I mean, because that bay, it's just like everything else, it's a balance, right? And it's just like with global warming, what we're seeing happen is that the seaweed that we get, the Mekabu, is growing further south because the temperature is changing in the water. And so things that were indigenous to one climate at one point are migrating to climates that are a little more hospitable. And so that's a challenge too. And I don't really know who's kind of keeping tabs on all that. Somebody hopefully is.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's challenging across the board. And in terms of beauty, it's interesting you said that people kind of focus on the sustainability of the formula and the cleanliness of the formula, but there are so many aspects from A to
Ah,
Z, right? When you're creating a beauty brand. And there's also a lot of brands that are, with quote unquote greenwashing, where it's all the three things that they do on the front side of the packaging, but you don't, as a consumer, you don't really dig into what is actually happening. So, as somebody who is, you're living, breathing, you started MASAMI with sustainability and cleanliness in mind, like, how would you advise the current beauty consumer as she's shopping? What should she look for to ensure that a brand is sustainable? Or, what are those signals?
it's always easy to look for certifications, right? Like we're PETA vegan certified, we're Leaping Bunny certified. However, I will say for small businesses like mine, those can be really expensive. And so not all
Yeah.
businesses can afford to get, the certification. So it doesn't mean that something's not great if it doesn't have a certification on there. It just probably means they couldn't spend the money to do it. I do think starting with the basics, your skin or hair care, don't buy anything with sulfates, parabens, or phthalates. Those are all known to be bad for you. Some some people it could just be an allergic reaction. I mean, if I used shampoo with a lot of sulfates, I would literally break out. My scalp would break out. And so you can have an allergic reaction, but you can also have much more dire consequences, like they can be endocrine disruptors, which can wreak havoc to your hormones in your system. It can be cancer causing, things that are much more aggressive. And the thing is, too, if you see a package and it just says like natural, that doesn't mean anything. If it says no sulfates on the front, well, there's a chance that it probably has parabens or phthalates because they would have probably called it out if they didn't have it. It's like, I always think it's interesting when they will just call out one ingredient and then you flip it over and you're like, oh, that's why they didn't say that. Because,
All the other ones are in there.
yeah. So it's deceiving because you look at it and you go, oh, it doesn't have sulfates, but then it still has all this other bad stuff. So I think it's hard. It's hard even for someone in the industry, and I'm not a cosmetic chemist, but some of the ingredients are not obvious. You look at the back and you can't tell because there's so many different names for things. So you do have to weed through, and you can also use apps. Whether it's Think Dirty, there's a bunch of apps that you can literally scan the label or plug in the brand and it'll tell you this ingredient's good. We follow EU standards because EU standards are way stricter than the US by a lot. It's like 1,300 ingredients banned versus like 11 or 13 now or whatever it is. Although I was just reading that some of the forever chemicals that we've recently banned here in the US that might get overturned now under Trump.
Oh,
Um,
really? Okay.
so that's TBD, but we don't know. But yeah, I think the EU is just a much more rigorous body, and there's always ingredients that are on the watch list. And that's their way of saying we don't know enough yet. It might not be great, but it might be fine. But then there are ingredients that are very clearly on the dirty list. You're not allowed to formulate with those. And so it's really surprising to me that in the US, we can still have products that are so bad for you, right? That are known to be causing health issues in food. I mean, there's that great example of, I think it's Fruit Loops, where they have a dye in the US that's actually like toxic. And in the European version, it's a natural, it's like a beet juice. And here they've got whatever that red dye is that is outlawed, that is not outlawed in Europe. But it's like if you know that it's not good and you're making a version for other places with a better product, a better substitute, why wouldn't you just make that here too? Now, usually it's cost.
And maybe they're finding, the US consumer, as much as we say we care, we're voting with our dollars and we're buying the cheapest thing sometimes that we can find because, that's what we have to do. And it
Yeah.
and I think if there was no demand for it, then maybe they wouldn't make it, but there's obviously demand.
Well, there's demand, but there's also lobbyists, right? And so it's like,
Hmm.
the sugar industry that like there's so many industries that have a vested interest in having us continue to eat a certain way. Or in beauty, again, it's hard for the big companies that control a lot of the beauty narrative have this stuff in there. So they don't necessarily want to change. And like I said, it's very expensive and difficult for them to do it. So even if it was the right thing to do, they're not really super interested in doing it. But that leaves an opportunity for us small brands because we're the ones that can come in. Like I said, we can kind of create a company from the get-go that represents the values that you want to bring out to the world. And then hopefully, obviously, you need to have a good product as well. You need to have a product that performs. That kind of goes without saying. But hopefully, once consumers try it and they realize the alternative, then, they start to switch their mindset into more conscious living. I mean, even we'll take shampoo, for example. When I was growing up, I remember a campaign, I think it was from Breck, maybe somebody else will remember, but it was basically training you to do double washing. You know how
Mm.
most of us grew up on the idea that you had to wash your hair twice. Once to get the dirt out and scrub your scalp, and then the other one to rinse and clean and get everything. That's complete fallacy. That's marketing. It's actually not good for your scalp to do that. And also squeaky clean. There was also a campaign, again, I can't remember the brand, but it was like this squeaky clean thing that your hair needed to have that. And you know what causes squeaky clean? It's like putting Tide detergent in your hair. That's going to make it really squeaky clean, but that's sulfates.
And we're used to that lather too, right?
We're used to the lather. It's like we've grown up thinking that that's the cue to cleanliness, or, that it's doing something, but the lather is literally detergent. And so our shampoo does have a very low foam. It doesn't have no foam because I find people don't like to think like they're washing hair with a conditioner. But we don't have sulfates. And so it is a low foaming agent and it's a natural ingredient that we were able to substitute. But it takes a little while to get used to it as a consumer, to adjust to using a different type of product. But I find that usually when people switch over, the feedback that I hear a lot is they say, oh my God, I don't have to wash my hair as often. I don't have to wash it twice for sure. I can do once and I'm really good. And then I don't have to wash it as often. So I can go further in between shampoos and I don't have to use as much product because the product is actually very dense. It's nutrient dense. It's not like a watery, thin shampoo that you're going to put in and just use a ton. And so that experience is different, but there's a way to kind of re-educate people about that value equation, that it's actually in many ways a better value because again, you're using less of it each time and you're washing less often. And so even though it costs more, this little bottle of shampoo is going to last you 6 months.
Right. I do want to ask you about, so after you were diagnosed with your breast cancer, did that
Mm.
change your perspective on beauty and business? Because, you've had decades in the beauty industry, then you launched your own brand, but then having this health challenge, right? How did that change your perspective or how you were in business?
Yeah, it definitely, you can't help but think about all sorts of things, right? Your legacy, how you're spending your time, what your priorities are, who you want to spend time with. I would have these very long chemo sessions, like 6 hours, and there's no Wi-Fi in these hospitals, which is crazy. But you were kind of left in your own thoughts, which for me is not a comfortable place necessarily, but it kind of forced me to reevaluate the business and how I was spending my time. And I actually had launched a second business during COVID, which is a beautiful business. And actually, we've, my
Oh,
daughter's my daughter's going to be making some more of these. But anyway, but I kind of had to park that business on the side because it was one of those decisions when I was trying to figure out how am I going to keep myself alive, how am I going to keep my business going. And that business sadly is kind of become a casualty. I keep the website on, but everything else I turned off. So when we do get an occasional order, great, but it's like we do zero marketing. I don't have the energy or the time. And then the other thing is, I ended up launching the Conscious Beauty Collective, which is a group now we've grown to 65 or more, actually, more indie beauty brands, beauty and wellness brands. And having that community around you of support and people that just know what it's like every day to grind it out, that's made a huge difference too. And so that has been an absolute blessing. And I spend a lot of time now on that and building that up because it helps everybody. It's not just helping me. And that's really fulfilling to feel like we're creating a place where people can find all those clean beauty brands. To your point earlier about like, well, how do they even figure it out? Well, we have a collective that has pretty much everything you're going to want to get, right? Skincare, makeup, hair care, fragrance, etc. And it just helps the consumer navigate. So that has been really fulfilling, and I really enjoy working with other founders who are in the same boat.
that's great. So, how does somebody find the brands that are in the Conscious Beauty Collective?
I have a tab in my on my website in my footer where you can see all the locations and brands. And I am going to be rebranding and launching a website this summer. So that's my summer project. I was resisting launching a dedicated website, even though everyone kept asking me for it, because it's just time, money. But then again, the more I thought about it, I'm like, I really should do it. So we've been launching pop-ups for the last year, and we have 14 across the US now. We've got 5 in New York City, 3 in Miami, 1 in LA, 1 here in Palm Springs, 1 in Virginia, 1 in upstate New York, 2 in Atlanta. After I got all these launched, I'm like, you know what? We've got some that are great partners. I'm going to pause launching new ones until we get our website done, we get our rebranding done, and then we'll kind of revisit expansion and launching more. But there's such a huge demand to get, we do curated shelves of like 10 to 12 products that we put in an existing retailer. And I just kept getting calls from people being like, can I get one? And I'm like, okay. I have a hard time sometimes saying no. So then I kind of had to say, wait a minute, let me take a step back, organize things a little bit better, get our website done, and then we'll revisit.
What criteria do you use when you are evaluating whether a brand fits the Conscious Beauty Collective and can be part of your community?
Well, first and foremost, you have to be clean by EU standards. It doesn't mean you have to have certification because, again, expensive, but you have to at least not formulate with any of the banned ingredients that are in the EU. And most, for like I said, most small brands these days, that's a given, but not always, but most. You have to be sustainably minded. So, what I've learned about the sustainability journey is that everyone's on a different path. Some people tackle it through their packaging. Oh, we didn't even touch on this before when you asked me, but I wanted to mention that packaging's a big part of it. Like instead of doing a secondary box, we have felt pouches that we put our products in, and we don't do this at retail, but when we're shipping direct to consumer, we use those because they're reusable. People love it. They'll stick their jewelry in there or whatever, hair ties in there or something, and they can reuse those pouches. So it's just thinking through all those different pieces of your entire business model. The product is one, the packaging, certainly, whether that's secondary packaging, primary packaging, but then also even just how you're shipping it, if you're offsetting your carbon. But to back to your question about who can join. So yes, so clean by EU standards, sustainably minded. You don't have to be vegan. Like my candle business has beeswax, so it's technically not vegan. But I don't want anything that has animal testing. So if you're not cruelty-free certified, that's fine as long as you can pretty much know that your products are not tested on animals or harming animals in any way. And then you need to give back to the community. So we have our MASAMI Institute. Everyone has something. We've got one brand, her cause is addiction recovery. A lot of brands that are 1% for the planet. I don't care what it is, as long as it's baked into your business ethos from the get-go. And then finally, you have to be independent. We're not here to support huge corporations. We're here to support small businesses. So you have to be an indie brand. I mean, you can have investors, but they can't be majority owners. You can't be owned by a PE company kind of thing.
What are the key benefits of joining the Conscious Beauty Collective if you were a small indie brand?
Most of the brands like the idea of retail placement, which is the big obvious thing. But we do a lot of stuff outside of that. We do customer acquisition tactics. So we'll collect emails through giveaways. We'll do organic growth as well. We'll do influencer outreach. We have a digital magazine where we do a lot of education because we find that the education to clean up the beauty industry is falling on us small brands. Because again, the big ones don't really want to be doing that because it doesn't help them. So we try to do education, and then we do master classes every month where we share learning on specific topics, which is really valuable. We had one of the founders who's really mastered flip. She shared her tricks and tips for us. But we've done everything from live streaming, live shopping, Amazon, drop shipping, you name it, YouTube, Pinterest. Like we've tackled almost everything. And the founders love it because we're getting real advice, not a vendor trying to sell us something. It's because sometimes it's just as valuable to know what not to do as opposed to what to do or who not to work with. It really is a community. I've become very close with many of the founders in the community who I consider very good friends now. And I think they would say they've also made very good friends. And yeah, it's just nice to have a group to share and learn and feel like you're all kind of on the same page. And the interesting thing that I found, and maybe it's just because I attract these types of people, but a lot of them are like me. They're older, they're kind of in their sort of second career phase, and we will often compare notes about even like financing investors and whatnot, and the ageism that still exists. I mean, yes, there's the difficulties being a female founder, but nobody really talks about actually, despite the data saying that older founders are usually more successful, investors do not like investing in older founders. It's just not, it's like the optics of it aren't great. And so that's been an interesting journey too.
I mean, there's also the ageism in beauty. Like, you don't see a lot of mature models, but I think it's changing a little bit.
Yeah, I think it is changing. I mean, there's a lot more chat around menopause now for sure. And even with celebrities, we actually are part of Clara Beauty Lab. We have a CBC shelf there, and Clara does Pamela Anderson's skincare and she has for years. And Pamela Anderson is now going out without makeup and showing up at award shows without makeup, and I just feel like that's bold,
Yeah.
to be a celebrity and know that you're going to get nitpicked. And it's tough because when you get older, the eyebrows are one of the first challenges. Like, she's got very thin eyebrows because she plucked them for so many years, right? Mine are non-existent. If I didn't pencil these on today, I'd look like an alien because after I had chemo, my eyebrows really never grew back. And same with my eyelashes. I have a few. I mean, there's a few there, but they're barely there. But it is like these things that happen when you're older and the things that women deal with when we're older. It's just different.
Yeah. You've built multiple brands and you've led large teams. You run your own companies. How do you make time for yourself? Like, how do you make time for wellness without burnout? Because you sound like you're juggling multiple things on any given day.
Yes, that is true. But what I've also gotten much better at is knowing that as an entrepreneur, I can be anywhere in the world. I don't have to literally be chained to a desk. So my husband and I travel a ton. In fact, we just came back from Bali. We hadn't
Oh,
been there since our honeymoon. We were there 25 years ago. And this is going to sound insanely indulgent to a lot of people, but I'll say it anyway. We had 90-minute massages every morning.
that sounds amazing.
I know, because it's incredibly affordable. It's just a different thing over there. And we kind of made that conscious decision that, like, okay, we're going to take time to build more wellness into our travel, into our lives. Like, we just did yoga this morning because I didn't used to have to do that, but now I need it. And it could be a combination of the age and the entrepreneurship, the stress. I don't know, but like I do think you have to just make it like it's schedule it in like you schedule a meeting. That's what I do.
Mm.
Because if it's in my schedule, then well, I've already carved out time for it. So there's no excuse. You just kind of have to do it.
Have you had any like mindset shifts from going from corporate to entrepreneur to, even facing your health challenges? Like any changes in how you deal with problems?
I've definitely had to be a lot less type A. And I'm not from New York, but I lived in New York for 25 years and I became a New Yorker big time. And you have to kind of let things go because when you're an entrepreneur, I mean, look, COVID happened right out of the gate for us. That was our first pivot, but everyone else had to pivot too. So we were not alone there. Then the cancer thing, and I had to pivot again. And it's always something. Now we've got the tariffs. So I think from a mindset perspective, I've had to just let things go, which is again not for my personality type, that's not super easy. I'm not great at meditating. I'm not great at just sitting still. I like to be busy. I like to do things, but I have had to just really practice putting the blinders on sometimes and not letting the outside stuff get to me, and then also just being more, if something bad happens and you have a really bad day, trying to at least appreciate the other things that are not going wrong so that it's not so black and white all the time. And I think I have a better balance certainly now than I did pre-cancer. And that's the weird thing about cancer is it sort of forces you to do that. Because, you're literally thinking about dying. And then you start to think about, you know, the legacy that you want to leave and what you want your children to think about. And so that stuff starts to inform your decisions moving forward and who you want to spend your time with. And that's helpful too, because it forces those decisions while I'm still relatively young. I mean, I'm 57. So, you can still have lots of years, hopefully, to do the things you want to do instead of being somebody who's on their deathbed regretting, like, why did I work so hard for 50 years?
You're working hard, but you're doing something that you have a different kind of purpose now. So you're still working hard.
I'm absolutely working really hard, but it's on my terms. And maybe that's the difference. It's not working for somebody else and it's not trying to promote somebody's toxic product, because at the end of it all, it's really not about so much accumulation of wealth, right? Because we die and then the money goes to our kids who hopefully it doesn't completely them up. But that's not always a good thing. So I think a lot about how can we do things that are going to actually create a movement or create behavior change to make things better. Now, my focus is in beauty, but you could take that same approach to any industry, really. What can you do to try to make it a little bit better so that when you're gone, you can feel like it's a little bit better than before? That's it. And it might not be a lot. It might be not a huge noticeable change, but at least it's moving in the right direction as opposed to there's so many things in this world right now that are going the other direction, right? So you just try to keep pushing it uphill as best you can.
What advice would you give for new founders, somebody like me, right? I am working on my own beauty brand. What advice would you give to your younger self who, I guess, maybe just starting MASAMI?
There's so many things. I do think a certain amount of naivete is a good thing because if you know everything going in, you're going to potentially be paralyzed of like, oh my God, this is too much. But I'd say the biggest thing is it is a 24/7 job. There really is there's no time off. I mean, you can make those breaks, but the business is still going. The business is there, and so there are a lot of founders who I know spent 90% of their energy in creating the product and birthing the product. And then they spend 10% of the energy after the product's in the world and they don't understand why they're not getting sales. And it really should be the other way around. And I know people don't like
Yeah.
to think about that because the fun part is making the products, but the 90% of effort is really in all the other stuff you have to do once the products are there. And the other thing I'll say is whatever budget that you put in place or you have in mind, just double it. I literally mean that. The cash flow challenge is an ongoing challenge, and there's always things that you had no idea you're going to have to spend money on. No idea. And all of a sudden you're like, wait, now I have to pay a franchise tax in California too. They want $800. You just get hit with so many expenses that cash flow is the number one reason why a lot of small businesses fold. They just run out of capital. So you just have to be super disciplined about what you're spending and how you're spending. And I also think there's a lot, like I still do a lot of stuff myself, and you shouldn't be hiring huge teams in the beginning and burning through all your money.
What do you think is worth investing in the beginning, and what do you think you can maybe get by bootstrapping a little?
Yeah. Well, I would say you definitely need the infrastructure. So you need a good website, but you can do Shopify and a theme and do a lot of it yourself. You don't need to hire a builder necessarily. So I'd say infrastructure, you need an email marketing partner. You need, like there's certain things that are going to drive your business that you kind of can't avoid. Your tech stack. So like look at that and then figure out how you can put that together. And then there's obviously inventory costs. That is what it is. Your cost to ship things. You have to figure, there's stuff that is like hard costs. But I would say things that you can get away with less, like now, oh my God, when I launched and we didn't have the AI tools we have now you really don't need to be hiring people to be shooting content for you. We use about a dozen different apps that are frankly outstanding. So that's one area where you shouldn't be spending a lot of money. And I would not hire a lot of people to do like, you don't need to hire someone to set up your Amazon. You don't need to hire someone to set up your whatever, your other e-com sites. Like that stuff, it's pretty intuitive once you get in there. I mean, I shouldn't say that. It's not super easy. And yes, there can be like snafus, which maybe then need help. But for the most part, you can get a lot of stuff done if you just kind of focus. So I don't think it's worth spending a lot of money on hiring these teams and experts. And do not, whatever you do, do not fall for these digital marketing agencies that say they're going to like 10x your business overnight for only, it's only $5,000 a month. Because the more you do yourself and the more you understand your business and you understand what works and you understand your metrics, the easier it is for you to bring in somebody else because then you know what to expect. You already have some benchmarks. You can see if it's going to work. You're not completely like blind, trusting that they're going to do what they say, which, yeah, that doesn't always work out.
Were there any moments that you felt any self-doubt? Or, I mean, you were already such a seasoned executive, you were CEO before you started MASAMI. So, were there any moments where you were like, I don't know if this is going to work?
Oh, all the time. I mean, I still have those, right? But I think one of the things I will say that helps me as a seasoned founder, and I try to tell this to younger founders too, is you have to trust your gut. And I think especially in the entrepreneur world, 80% is better than perfect. And you just have to move. You got to try do tons of experimentation and you just got to try things and do things and move. And there are days when I'm like, what am I doing? Like, this is ridiculous. Why don't I just stop and, go spend all my time in Italy? This is crazy. But then I remember, no, I do enjoy it. I do feel like I'm making a dent. But that's what the community's for. When you have those kind of days and then you reach out to somebody who's in the community and they're like, yeah, I was just feeling the same way. And then you can kind of compare notes and hopefully get back on track. But I'd say overall, there are a lot more good days than bad days for sure. And the bad days, well, you need those days to make the good days better.
So, as we wrap up, what's next for MASAMI? What's next for the Conscious Beauty Collective? What's next for Lynn?
Yeah, we have a lot going on. For MASAMI, we're continuing to expand and grow, which is great. It's a little bit of a steady Eddie strategy because we don't have lots of money to throw at it, but it's been growing and it's been good. I'm hoping to launch a new product next year, but we're working on stuff, so we'll see. Sometimes it takes a lot longer than you expect. For Conscious Beauty Collective, we are going to go through a rebranding this summer, which is exciting. And we're going to be launching some community platforms to do more education. We're going to be expanding into additional retail partners. So we've got the 14 today, I would say in a year, at least 20, we'll be in 2025, hopefully. I just think we're trying to just keep things moving.
If somebody who's listening out there has an indie beauty brand or is starting to think about that, how can they get in touch with you? Like, where can they learn more about you or
Yeah.
even actually apply to be part of the Conscious Beauty Collective?
Well, there's really not like an application process per se. It's all been word of mouth, but you can easily find me LinkedIn or email Lynn at lovemasami.com, LOVEMASAMI.com. I'm on Insta. I'm on all the socials. Love Masami Hair. Conscious Beauty Collective Shop is on Instagram. So you can ping us on any of those and we'll get back to you.
All right, well, that's a wrap. Thank you so much for
Awesome.
joining us today.
Thank you. It was a great conversation.